Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state issues, sometimes federal issues, and how they just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from a basement somewhere in Springfield, but I'm the political reporter for the State Journal-Register. We are back on the air as we were a week ago, and with me today to talk about ongoing, very interesting movement in state government and society in general in Illinois. With me, and a veteran of the program, but the first time by video, Kent Redfield is here. He is a professor emeritus of political science, University of Illinois, Springfield. Welcome back, Kent.
Good to be here.
Right, and Peter Hancock. He is a State House reporter with Capitol News, Illinois. Welcome back, Peter.
Good to see you, Bernie.
Okay, well, life goes on. Usually when the governor signs a budget, if there is less than total controversy or less than a pandemic and demonstrations in the street, there's usually some kind of event, but the governor didn't have a big event to sign the budget. But Kent, we do have a budget of about $42.9 billion, and I guess it depends a lot on, or it's hoping for some money from the federal government to pay back some potential borrowing of, I believe, $5 billion. Why don't you have at it, Professor?
Yes, there's at least an authorization to borrow $5 billion from the Federal Reserve. When way back when, pre-pandemic, we were assuming that we would have money from selling marijuana that would increase the state coffers. That has not taken a huge hit. In fact, we're still pretty much on track. We were assuming a lot of money from gambling, from sports betting, but there are no sports now, from casinos, but casinos are closed. The other kind of leg of that, how we were going to actually pay for all of the spending that the governor and the Democratic majority wanted, was the graduated income tax, because that change is not revenue neutral. There is built into passing that graduated income tax is a tax bill, and a statute that's already been passed that will increase change the rates and would generate more money, perhaps $1 billion more than what the old income tax structure would have produced. So all of that was a pretty difficult thing to put together. It was very tenuous, and now we've had this huge drop in state revenues, and so in sales tax and income tax, particularly the sales is the most visible. The income tax takes a little bit longer to sort out where we're at, and we could be in a very, very difficult situation if, in fact, the federal government does not come through with the same type of stimulus package that was passed after the stock market housing crash of 2008. We got an influx of money from the feds to make up for the revenue loss. It probably was not sufficient in terms of getting out of that recession as quickly as we could have. This is a much worse situation, and so if we don't get money from the federal government, and a huge amount of money, we're going to be borrowing. And then, just the last point is when you say, well, we need to cut the budget equivalent to 5%, 10%, whatever, pick a number. Unfortunately, when you have to fund bonds at 100%, when you have to pay pensions at 100%, when you've and you want more money for schools, or you're at least going to hold that harmless. The early scenarios that we're looking at were like a 35% cut in operating, the normal state agencies. So this is a very difficult situation. I don't know that we're necessarily going to end up like the bad old Rauner years without any budgets and running up huge bills, but the potential is certainly there.
Yeah, that's true. I know that the governor argued in the face of some Republican talk about, let's cut this and let's cut that, that in the middle of a pandemic is not the time to cut back on state services. Of course, DCFS, Department of Children and Family Services, has seen various problems, just the reports of, children in families contacted by the state who had died, more than 100 in a couple of recent years, I believe. So there's like $152 million more for Department of Children and Family Services. But you still had Republicans upset with the budget, Peter, just because there weren't adequate cuts in their minds, I believe, and perhaps too much reliance on the feds.
Yeah, I think the Democrats' response to that is that this is a time when government needs to be spending money, even if it's deficit spending, because nobody else can. And government has the ability to borrow money from the Fed and keep at least part of the economy going, keep the wheels running, as it were. So yeah, we've economics majors might get this. We've kind of put John Maynard Keynes in the driver's seat here, the father of Keynesian economics, which kind of led FDR through the Depression. Government needs, even if you have to print money, just get money out there in the economy, so that use fiscal policy to counteract this economic downturn.
Yeah, well, it is interesting because at the federal level, we've certainly seen that with the president signing bills and getting bipartisan support in Washington to aid all kinds of business people and others who have lost so much money from the from the coronavirus. Peter, I'll stick with you here. In the middle, after fighting COVID-19 all of these weeks and months, then you had the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, who died after his neck was under the knee of a police officer for more than 8 minutes. You have seen a sustained demonstrations in cities large and small across the country. There are calls for, as Governor Pritzker put it at one event, police accountability, criminal justice reform, and investment in poor communities. He had a roundtable discussion of this in Springfield, meeting with some members of city council, but also some young high school aged organizers of one of the big demonstrations in Springfield that drew more than 1,000 and some say 1,500 people. Where is police reform going, Peter, in the national conversation now that the Illinois legislature is not scheduled to be back until after the election for veto session?
One of the things I find interesting are these calls to defund the police. There are people out there who don't just want to reform police departments, they want to completely remake them so that they look more like human service agencies rather than armed paramilitary forces patrolling the streets. And don't know how far that's going to go. But you're seeing both state and national calls, I think, for police accountability. The Democrats in Congress, in the House, have unveiled a sweeping bill that includes putting together a national database to track police misconduct.
Right. That would be in the U.S. House, correct?
In the U.S. House, that's right. So, I think there probably will be something. What strikes me about the sustained protests in the Black Lives Matter movement, when that first got started, kind of in the wake of the riots in Ferguson, Missouri, it was largely an African-American movement. You go out to the Black Lives Matter protests in Springfield, in Chicago, or anywhere else, you're now seeing everybody coming out. It's not a political movement, it's a social movement. And a large segment of white America really seems to have signed on with this. And I've just never seen the social movement like this before.
Well, we will see where that carries, because I'm guessing there will continue to be some partisan differences. And the president President Trump has certainly said he's a president of law and order, and basically says police are doing a great job, other than the very occasional, even he was somewhat critical of what happened in Minneapolis, where we now have 4 police officers charged in the death of Mr. Floyd. Kent, our own Attorney General in Illinois, Kwame Raoul, who is a former state senator in the old Barack Obama seat from Chicago, before he was Attorney General, had been for an idea to license police. He has brought that up again as the state's Attorney General. And again, licensing would allow, just like a barber or a doctor that gets a license from the state, if there's a problem with what they've done, you can track it. You can have some outside kind of discipline, not just from within an agency where they serve. Anyway, Kent, I was a little surprised, I guess, when I heard Governor Pritzker say he's looking at that idea too. So I don't know if it has traction, but what do you think the chances are of licensing police?
Well, you had in the paper today, and then there was a discussion of a meeting or a talk of setting up a meeting between the chiefs of police and the administration and the Attorney General's office, and so the chiefs of police is an association of, essentially the administration of police departments, and so you have, you've got a public or city council, and you've got the general public it has an interest. You have the police, and particularly the police unions that have an interest, and then you've got the people that are running the police departments, the police chiefs, and they have, as opposed to the police unions, they have an interest in better accountability, in being able to enforce discipline, hold their police, the people that work for them, accountable. And so it's an interesting kind of dynamic, because it certainly has to do with dealing with excessive use of force and investigations and due process in terms of the cases like the death of George Floyd. But it also has to do with kind of the power that exists within police unions, the contract power, the budget power that they can exercise, the desire of city councils and mayors, to control spending and accountability. And then you've got chiefs of police, administrators who are have an interest in this situation. And so it's certainly specific to this time and what has caused it, but it also is a long-standing kind of a dynamic in terms of control and leverage between the sworn officers through their unions, the appointed officials, the chiefs of police, and then the city councils and the mayors in terms of exercising control. And so I think it's, the fact that the chiefs of police are interested in talking about this, and if you had state licensing, it would be another kind of leverage that you could use in terms of discipline. So it's a very interesting development, and it's just another indication of how, not only how the specific interest, incident and the protests, spurred this, point in time, but how, things tend to ripple out into long-standing kinds of relationships and people with interest in kind of changing the existing dynamic. This will be very interesting to watch.
Oh, it will, and it reminds me of, Illinois, of course, has the most units of government of any state in the nation by at least, I think, a couple thousand, with about 7,000 units of government. But a lot of our local agencies have police departments. There are park police, around Springfield. The universities and colleges usually have their own police forces. So if you do get into licensing, it's more than mayors. It's going to be all kinds of folks, with
right.
Other departments too. Peter, you touched on this earlier, but the whole defund the police movement and what it really means. The governor, when asked about that, as many Democrats who are elected types, said that's a poor choice of words. That's not what we mean. We're talking about maybe more mental health services, when some people should go to treatment instead of get arrested, and deal with people who know that stuff. But it clearly, again, President Trump is going to say defund the police is a bad idea, and people in Congress, for example, I heard a member of Congress from Central Illinois, Rodney Davis, say the other day that's it's a stupid idea to say that. Again, the wording is an interesting thing that the Democrats may be throwing the Republicans a campaign issue here.
Yeah, I think the president is definitely going to weaponize that phrase in the campaign to say that anybody who supports that idea is soft on crime and in favor of mayhem in the streets. But I think you're right. The governor touched on this. I think what they're talking about is shifting resources out of the armed paramilitary force and into human services, like drug and alcohol treatment, mental health therapy, other kinds of things that they believe will have a bigger impact on crime and public safety than just throwing money into an armed police force.
Right, right, and also, of course, investment in the communities. Very interesting. Kent, the Republican Party has also taken some shots at the Governor Pritzker, because I guess there was some video of him posted online demonstrating with people for, justice in post George Floyd. But he was clearly with more than 50 people around and more than 10 people around and in a crowd. He was wearing a mask. But there are situations, and there were several pictures that the Republican Party of Illinois posted. Look at basically the hypocrite governor. He's telling all these businesses to stay closed during the pandemic, and yet he's not social distancing. And the governor, of course, says, so First Amendment rights and being out there with like-minded people for social justice is important enough to take the risk. But Kent, obviously, all these lines get blurred about what's appropriate to do these days. And, the governor has told people stay away from everybody else. And in this case, he didn't.
Yeah. And these sorts of things at this point, the governor certainly is, he's 2 years plus away from being on the ballot again. But it does help with the Republican narrative about, how consistent, how science-based have we been in terms of, crowd size, the various elements of lockdown. And so, the science would indicate that being outside certainly dramatically reduces the kinds of dangers that you have when you have groups of people in closed spaces, whether it's a crowded bar or a concert in an auditorium. So it's and when you make an argument about, well, you have to you accept a certain amount of risk to do something that's important, and that a protest is more important than having a drink at the corner bar. But all of this, what if you've got pictures on one side and explanations on the other, the pictures generally have a bigger impact. So it will pass, but it's just another indication of kind of how we communicate with each other these days.
Yeah, indeed. And with social media, everybody can have a picture out in the public domain now, and it used to be kind of you had to get through an editor somewhere. So, Peter, let's talk about the virus, which before the demonstrations in the street for things like talking about the state of policing and police community relations, coronavirus was the big deal. You had more than 60 days in a row, I think, of the governor having those afternoon updates. We are now in Illinois in phase 3, which allows like outdoor seating at restaurants, but there are, I guess, a small but growing number of restaurants that are letting people indoors, despite what the governor's Illinois says is supposed to be happening. So what is the state of Illinois? I know that the governor says that we've bent the curve and kept infection rates and death rates, even though I think it's more than 6,000 now in Illinois, down compared to what they might have been. But we're still in the middle of controversy because businesses cannot fully reopen yet, or at least many of them.
Yeah, if you look at the metrics on the Department of Public Health's website, you will see that the number of new daily cases being reported is really on the downslide. I think on Wednesday of this week, June 10th, they had the smallest number of new cases that they'd had since March 30th, and that's back when they were doing very limited testing. So the infection rate does seem to be going down. And if you look at the positivity rate, the percentage of tests that are coming back positive, it's hovering around 4 or 5% right now. And as the governor said this week, all 4 regions of the state are now on track to enter phase 4 June 26th. That I think is the earliest that could happen. And at that point, you'll be able to have public gatherings of 50 or fewer people instead of 10. But I think restaurants and bars will still be limited to outdoor seating. But things like outdoor recreation programs, Little League baseball, all those things get to come back. But at the same time, the virus is still out there. And you have these large protests that, you mentioned, where large numbers of people are gathering, not social distancing, many of them not wearing masks. And there is a big concern that that alone could spark, a second wave. And then you have fall coming around, the cold and flu season. And there's concern that the virus could resurge, in the fall along with the flu season. It's a new virus. We don't know how this thing, what its life cycle is, how it's, going to perpetuate itself. And really until they come up with a vaccine or a cure, we're still going to be living with this thing for a long time. And we're all, we're not going to go back to normal anytime soon.
We certainly aren't. What's interesting is you still have Republicans. In fact, just this week, I believe it was all 19 Senate Republicans, sent a letter to the governor saying, open up, do it faster. The governor keeps saying, despite, the risks people take as they're demonstrating in the street, he's saying, we're following science, it's working. Eventually things will open up some, although the fully restored Illinois under the governor's plan is not until there's an effective treatment or a vaccine. So that's a long way off. But we should see, again, restaurants open maybe by the end of June. So within a couple of weeks, things should be more open, even though there is outdoor seating now. So if it's not raining, you're okay. And if you're following the rules, you'll be outside.
One of the statistics that really set me back just within the last couple of weeks, the total death toll in the United States from COVID-19 now exceeds the American death toll in Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan combined. And it's done that's 70 years of American warfare. And this has happened in the span of about 4 or 5 months. So if you don't think this thing is serious, I don't know how to convince you. I know people are impatient. People want to get back to work. They want to get back to social lives, some sort of sense of normalcy. But as the governor says, that's going to take some time.
It is indeed. And it is interesting because what some of the people say is, well, a lot of it has affected nursing homes, which is a terrible thing, but you have some elderly people with underlying conditions. On the other hand, people, you see certainly stories nationwide and some more locally of people who are younger who are getting the disease, some with less symptoms than others, but also some passing away at younger ages too. So again, you're right, we don't know where it goes, and it has been a big number. Kent, we've had some transition of a sad sort in recent weeks. There was Larry Walsh, is a former state senator, who became Will County administrator from Joliet for, I think he was a number of years. He passed away from cancer. And then Art Berman died. He's north side of Chicago, education expert, retired state senator. State Senator Randy Menard from Bunker Hill in Central Illinois, who used to be chief of staff in the Senate, talked about what a great, how much he learned from Art Berman and what a great advocate for education and the education formula he was. So Kent, with a little of your perspective, some folks leave this legislative life, but have a legacy they carry on.
Yes, and Walsh was, after leaving the General Assembly, was a longtime executive in Will County and was a real force in local government. I didn't know him as well. I did when I worked for the House. Then I had interactions with Senator Berman, and this is one of the giants of someone who is, a really good person and really cares about issues, but particularly education, and a voice that commands respect and provides leadership, and those sorts of things are, when people start talking about term limits. I usually think about the giants that the Illinois has been so fortunate to have to help us shape public policy through the years.
Right, and I know what you're saying is sometimes experience matters even in legislation. So on we go. I'll just finish the show by noting that just another victim of COVID-19, the 2021 Miss Illinois County Fair Queen Pageant has been called off. So it'll be another year, every year at the State Fair, ribbon cutting. The County Fair Queen, who is from the Illinois Association of Agricultural Fairs, is there. The reigning queen is Kelsey Kessler of Carmi, so perhaps she'll be queen for another year. With that, Peter Hancock and Kent Redfield, thanks for your conversation. I'm Bernie Schoenburg. Thank all of you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.